Hey, it's Braulio Rosa with the Broward Bar Buzz. I'm here today with Paul Lopez of the Tripp Scott Firm, a longtime powerhouse firm here in Broward. Welcome, Paul.
Thanks for having me, Braulio. Thank you.
So let's start off with some of the basics. Tell us a little bit about your law firm.
Sure, happy to. Look, our law firm, we've had a presence here in Broward County for a long time, over 50 years. We celebrated that several years ago. We have about 50 some odd lawyers. Half of us do litigation, the other half do the mergers, acquisitions, estate planning, environmental, trust estates, all those types of things. And we have specialists in all areas. And kind of the name of the game for us in the community and for our clients is we like to be known as a one-stop shop. We like our clients, most of the clients that we represent, whether they're small or large or mid-sized companies, we represent them in all facets of their business. You know, from their growth stages to as they're evolving, as they're becoming more mature companies, as they're looking for acquisitions, we can help them. And that allows us to help them at all facets of their business. And we also represent individuals, entrepreneurs, people in the community, high net worth individuals that need help. Obviously family law issues come up. We have specialists in all those areas. So we really try to be a one-stop shop for most of our clients. And we've got some great experienced lawyers, great partners, great mentors when I was coming up. We have a really nice footprint in the community. And this is kind of our backyard, Broward County. We have a few of us that also live in Palm Beach County, and we have a presence there. But Broward County is kind of our backyard.
So good to know, because I've always thought of you guys as this powerhouse that deals with lobbying with ed and that sort of thing. And it's good to educate everyone that you're actually a full service law firm that can take care of the needs of all your clients. I know you're the head of the litigation department. Right. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. I've been in that role now for over 10 years. And frankly, look, I have some wonderful litigators that surround us and surround me. I have great associates. I have great partners. And, it really became, I think, a de facto situation. I've tried a lot of cases at the law firm. I've tried small cases when I first started. And basically my mantra was anything that walks in the door that needs a trial, I want to try the case. I want to learn how to be a trial lawyer. So I had the good fortune of trying a lot of cases early on in my career. And then, as you kind of start moving up the ladder, so to speak, you start trying bigger and bigger cases. And I've, been fortunate. I've tried some really large cases here in South Florida. And we've got a great team. I've got a great team of people around me. And I guess I like to call meetings every quarter to talk about what's going on with the litigation practice. So by de facto choice, I guess I became the head of litigation. But it's really a team effort. Look, I tell people all the time, to be successful as a trial lawyer and to be successful, managing people and dealing with the issues we deal with day to day, you got to have a great team. It's a team sport. Sometimes it's a little bit of a contact sport, not really, but you know what I mean, metaphorically.
Yeah,
so you got to have a good team around you. And I've been blessed that, as a young trial lawyer, I had some wonderful mentors that brought me along and showed me the ropes. And at this point in my career, I'm giving what I can back, whatever that means. I really try to do that with my team because I've just got some really bright people that push me every day. And I love coming into the office. I love interacting with them. A few years ago when we were all in those semi-lockdowns, that really was not a lot of fun. I didn't get to see people live and in person. We really believe that people, especially associates, should be in the office and should be interacting with partners and interacting with their colleagues because we really think that's the way to become a really good lawyer. We're in the people business, right?
Agreed.
And, we're in front of judges, we're in front of juries, we're in front of magistrates. It's a people business and you have to know how to interact with people and hopefully know how to communicate because that's part of our job, being able to communicate as clearly and as effectively as possible.
Sure. So I know we were talking off camera about some major cases you've dealt with and, Rico has been thrown around a lot lately. And when I think of Rico, I think of Al Capone or, whatever, these people where they get you some other way. So tell us about that case you handled that involved Rico, but it was on the civil side, right?
It was. It was a fascinating case, Braulio. So we had two limited partnerships from New York. They had over about 1,000 investors out of Germany. and they had invested in the U.S. real estate market. And they owned, let's just say, a couple of dozen properties throughout the country, golf courses, apartments, hotels, so forth. They had a group of managers that were managing the portfolio. And unbeknownst to the managers back in Germany, when the real estate market took a tank back in 2008, 2009, these portfolio managers started, I guess, trying to cover their own losses and cover their tails. And they started selling out properties without authorization out of the portfolio and keeping the money. Ooh. And they were reporting back to Germany that the portfolio was fine, the portfolio was stable, it was generating returns, basically business as usual. Well, when the managers in Germany actually started doing some diving into what was really going on, they found that the managers had been selling off tens of millions of dollars worth of property without their authorization and were basically depleting the portfolio. So they brought us in to first start investigating things and trying to understand what we could do and what were the options. So we looked at it and we started understanding that what this kind of rogue group of managers were really doing is they were conspiring among one another to A, defraud the investors and defraud the portfolio by selling out the properties, and then B, by sending emails, internationally, basically reporting that everything was fine and copacetic. So we started hitting the books, we started looking at the statutes, and we realized that actually it fell within the Rico statute, which is really, when you sum it up, it's a conspiracy of two or more people conspiring to defraud, a third party. So we immediately ran into federal court. We asked for an emergency injunction. We got an emergency nationwide injunction against the rogue managers. And then as we fanned out and used all of our resources to figure out the extent of the fraud, we spent about 2 years putting the puzzle together. We tried that case in 2016.
Can I ask you,
Sure.
What does it take? What kind of specialist do you need to bring in to figure out all the fraud that's going on? I'm assuming as lawyers, you do some of that, but maybe it's accountants, or who are you bringing in?
Yeah, the key in a case like that, like all these massive complex cases, you got to assemble a team of experts that help you with this. Yeah. You bring in the forensic accountants, right? You bring in the real estate experts that know how to look at a title and know how to do a title search. I don't know how to do that. Right. I'm a trial lawyer.
Yeah.
I hire experts to help me and guide me and educate me on that. So you bring in the forensic accountants, you bring in the real estate people, and they start figuring out the right questions to ask. And then when they get the information, they know how to look at it, understand it, analyze it, and then give us the information that we need to then file the appropriate paperwork with the court. So, it took a couple of years to put the puzzle together. And what's interesting about that case is, because it involved crimes, as you said, Rico is usually involving criminal element. The Fort Lauderdale U.S. Attorney's Office was involved. So we were working in concert with them, and they were essentially watching what we were doing as we were prosecuting the case and putting the case together. And ultimately, we went to trial. It was a 2-week trial in federal court. And the challenge in that case was the following. We had tens of thousands of documents. The magistrate judge, because we did it in front of Magistrate James Hopkins by consent, the magistrate judge told us he wasn't going to give us 3 months to try the case. He said, we need to be done in 2 weeks.
Wow.
So how do I put that one together? So
millions of documents,
terabytes of information. So we decided to basically use the rules of evidence to summarize all the evidence. And there's a way to do that. There's a process to do that. So we summarized these thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of pages of documents, and we basically tried the case in a summary fashion. And once we showed the jury and walked the judge through all of the summary of evidence that we had, and it was a mountain of evidence. I mean, literally, I think we had, in opening statements and closing arguments, I think we had about 35 to 40 bankers' boxes of documents in front of the jury.
Wow.
And we told them, guys, we're not going to keep you here for 2 months. We're not allowed to. We got to try this case in 2 weeks. We tried the case, and ultimately the jury came back and found that we had proved I believe it was 32 predicate acts of Rico, the conspiracy, and gave us a verdict. And ultimately it led to, I believe it was one of the top 100 verdicts in 2016, with treble damages and so forth. It was about a $30 million verdict.
Wow.
And it was a team effort, but the neat footnote to the case was that ultimately the Fort Lauderdale U.S. Attorney's Office then took essentially our case and then used that to prosecute the defendants, and each of the defendants ended up being indicted and ultimately served prison time. And I believe one of them is still in prison today as a result of that fraud. So it was a fascinating case, not a case that I ever thought I would try, but through a, kind of a connecting of the dots and serendipitously, it fell within our group, and I had the privilege of trying that case. And again, it's a team effort. I had wonderful lawyers surrounding me, supporting me, but it was a fascinating trial, and there was a lot of things that happened in that case along the way that were a cast of characters, just some bad actors that we ended up really getting a nice judgment against them, and there was a lawyer who was involved as part of the conspiracy, not as a party, but almost aiding and abetting one of the conspirators. We ended up getting a contempt order against him in New Hampshire, and he ended up getting disbarred as a result of the action. So it was just a really, really, unfortunately, a colorful cast of characters. And unfortunately, you see that a lot in South Florida.
It's a haven for these kind of things, it seems.
Unfortunately, South Florida seems to draw a lot of this element down here. And, as we tell all of our clients, be wary. It's the old saying, trust but verify.
Right.
You just see a lot of that in South Florida. And that was probably one of the larger cases I've been involved in that involved that kind of.
So if the judgment was $30 million approximately, is that basically laid out to how much money these nefarious characters defrauded the company? Yeah,
just about. And the managers in Germany, who, they had 1,000 investors or so in Germany that they were reporting back to, one of the things they needed to make sure of was that A, they were going after the bad guys, B, showing that they were going to do whatever it took to go get a judgment against these bad guys. And obviously collecting on those types of judgments is very difficult, if not impossible, when you have these bad actors who basically take the money and probably spend it all, pay off their other obligations and debts. But they had to do it. And we were happy that they chose us to do it. And we were able to get a very nice result for them, which helped them be able to report back to Germany what had happened.
Yeah, that's extremely complex.
Yeah, no, it was a case that what was really interesting about it is fascinating because you have, let's just say we had 24 properties in the portfolio. You really had to cast a wide net nationwide to figure out, if you could, through the bank records and the title searches, where all the money went and how these transactions were done, because then you had to be able to show that those were the elements of the Rico. In other words, they were the elements of the crime, if you will. In this case, it was civil, but you still have to prove the elements. And, look, as a trial lawyer, my job is I got to figure out what are the elements of the case, right? What do I have to prove, and how am I going to prove that? I've got to figure that out from day one. And again, that's something that you look at the case from the day one. What I like to do is I like to look at the jury instructions. I like to go to the jury instructions on the causes of action, because usually that'll give me my roadmap, how I'm going to have to prove and then prosecute my case. So that's kind of one of my mantras. Look at the jury instructions first, work backwards from those, and then you can figure out if you have a case. And if you don't, right, because sometimes cases don't bear out the way you think they do, then you have to adapt and you have to be flexible and not be rigid and not stick to a script. I mean, if the case doesn't pan out, you can't just try to put the square peg in the round circle. You've got to adapt to the environment and the evidence.
Do you recall the name of the company by chance?
Well, it was two limited partnerships. I do. Yeah. HTP Limited Partnerships 1 and 2 from New York. And again, they were private entities that were set up as essentially investment vehicles for many people, unfortunately, that were retired individuals in Germany who had put some of their investment and retirement savings believing that the U.S. market was safe, right? Because the real estate market in the U.S. was, cranking along back in the early 2000s, only to come to a bitter stop in 2008 and 2009, right? Right. We saw a lot of that in South Florida.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, they were caught up in not only that, but unbeknownst to them, they didn't know they also had dishonest managers here in the United States. So that was a tragedy, frankly, on a human level. And that's some of what we see. We don't deal with criminal matters. I don't deal with people's losses of liberty and all that. But many of the things that come across my desk do involve some level of a human tragedy. Yeah. Right. There's a fraud. There's a deception. There's someone who fails to fulfill their obligations under an agreement. Companies that are not fulfilling their obligations to another company. So it's a level of a tragedy. That one was a really super intense level of a tragedy.
So you're quite the lawyer. You're dealing with these very complex issues. So you went from Rico, and then we talked about another recent case you're dealing with on receiverships. Talk about that, because that's a whole nother rigmarole, or how do we say, un revolú. It was a big mix up there, right?
A big brouhaha.
Brouhaha, right?
Yeah, last summer we got a call from Judge Raj Singhal, who's just a wonderful judge here in the Southern District, and he asked me and my team if we could assist him and the SEC in what was alleged to be a $100 million plus Ponzi scheme case involving a trucking company out of Coral Springs. And he asked if we could, staff it up, get ready to go, and deal with it, and serve as receivers to help the court and help the SEC with basically taking over the company, and then figuring out what to do with this company. Because essentially, when you're appointed as the receiver, you're appointed as a fiduciary of the court. You're an extension of the court, and you're, for lack of a better term, you become the CEO of this company, and then you have to try to figure out, what am I going to do with this company? Is it a viable entity? Does it have any ability to go forward, right? Because unfortunately, when you're dealing with a Ponzi scheme and perhaps a criminal enterprise, there's going to be some bad actors, but there's going to be a lot of people that are innocent, have nothing to do with the Ponzi scheme, have nothing to do with enriching themselves with this criminal enterprise. So, we got the assignment last June. And it was like a scene out of CSI, I get the call the morning, I think it was June 21st. I get the call that I might be asked to do this. And then about midday, they call me and said, you're being asked to do this. You need to go to the company's headquarters in Coral Springs and assist with the execution of search warrants and arrest warrants. Not because I'm doing that, but because you are taking over the company. You have to then work with the AUSA, the Assistant U.S. Attorney, and the special agents in charge, because they're executing search warrants, and they're going to start taking corporate property. They're going to start taking stuff from the physical headquarters of the business, and I've got to get there and give them the green light, yay or nay, if they can take, the items that they want to remove, and then come up with an inventory of those items. So I have to be there. So anyways, fascinating. I show up, there's about probably like 80 agents there.
Wow.
There's squad cars everywhere, lights everywhere, guys with guns and holsters. I'm a civil trial lawyer. I try cases in Broward County and Palm Beach County,
Not your jam.
Not my jam necessarily. So, but,
thank you, Judge Singhal.
Yeah, thank you. You turned my summer upside down, but no, I can't thank him enough, because it was fascinating. And by the way, I should mention, I'm co-receiver with my colleague, Jennifer Waba, and Jennifer and I have served as co-receivers. And it's fantastic to work with somebody like Jennifer. Jennifer came to us a few years ago. She clerked at the 4th District Court of Appeal. Then she clerked with Judge Singhal, and she's working hand in hand with me in that receivership. And it's just wonderful, because we've got a great team that we had to put in place. Jennifer, myself, Chuck Tattlebaum, a few other people in our bankruptcy group and our receivership group. And basically, we had to take over this company and figure out, what are we going to do with it, right? We've got almost 300 employees. It was a legitimate trucking company with about 250 plus trucks on the road. So it was a real entity. The problem is, it was losing millions and millions of dollars a month and per year. And the only way to sustain it was by getting more investor money. It's a typical Ponzi scheme. So we had to do assessments right away. We had to bring in experts like forensic accountants, start doing viability assessments, and then make some really tough decisions about what we're going to do with this company. Because again, we've got innocent people. Their lives are being impacted. These are working folks. They're paycheck to paycheck. And we've got to come up with a humane way to, unfortunately let them go.
So you've got the employees that are innocent, have no clue,
Yep.
that are being harmed,
Yep.
as well as the investors who didn't know.
So we've got the employees. And then on the flip side, we've got about over 1,500 investors.
Wow.
Primarily in the Haitian community, which apparently this Ponzi scheme focused on that community. And we had to deal with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of investors in those first few weeks, just explaining the situation to them. Because as you can imagine, Braulio, these are folks that, many of them paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
Many of them, gut-wrenching stories that, explaining to us that this was their life savings. and we're now being entrusted to figure out how can we get some of this money back for you. You know, how do we figure out a way to locate the money if we can, and then recoup it for you? Because these are gut-wrenching stories. I mean, these are people that have kids. They're working 2 or 3 jobs, and we are trying to figure out, all right, A, we've got to deal with the company. B, those are human lives, right? Then B, we've got the investors, and these are human beings who are coming to us in tears every day. Like, we had lines of people waiting to talk to us, and we talked to every one of them, either physically if they showed up at the office, me and my team, or by email. And we start the process of setting up, we start setting up websites. We start setting up ways for them to communicate, to process claims, submit claims, explain what their situation is. Because here was the other complication with the Ponzi. Because it was a legitimate company, you do have people that had legitimate ownership interests in trucks. There were 250 trucks that were owned by these investors. However, most of them were financed. So these people are now out of their investment. They have a financial obligation to the finance companies of these trucks that they own. And they're trying to figure out what is going to happen. How are we going to get some money back for them? It was
what a mess.
Yeah, it was a mess. I mean, just a mess. And
they're also liable for any of the assets that these people rented out or bought but mortgaged out to.
Yeah, and then
they took their money.
Well, and then you have another layer. So yes.
Oh my.
And then you have another layer. They had operations in Lubbock, Texas. They had a warehouse in Lubbock, Texas, with another fleet of trucks over there, and we have staff over there. So we've got facilities in Lubbock. We've got facilities here in Coral Springs. We're trying to figure out where all the real estate is and where all the trucks are and everything else. And through some good fortune, we were able to very early on, through the help of doing a lot of investigation, a lot of interviews of existing employees, we located several $1 million worth of property, real estate, actual hard assets that we were able to seize. And our job is to seize it, protect it, and then ultimately try to dispose of it and sell it to the highest bidder and try to recoup some assets for the investors. And
wow.
So yes, I mean, look, as a trial lawyer, it was really fascinating for me to all of a sudden start wearing the hat of a CEO of a trucking company, right? Which is kind of a new thing.
Paul's Trucking.
Yeah, Paul's Trucking, yeah. I think we're going to stick to trying cases, though, I think. But then ultimately, look, the idea was we got to figure out how to liquidate this company. And then we're in the process of now then figuring out who are some of the third-party financial institutions and or professionals that may have aided and abetted or provided substantial assistance to the Ponzi. So while they may not have been directly involved with the criminal enterprise, they may have provided aiding and abetting the criminal enterprise by turning a blind eye to the Ponzi. So that's kind of the phase of the assignment we're in now. The main defendant has not been tried yet, so there's certain things I really can't get into, but I believe he'll be tried in the next few months.
Can we say the name of the company at this time?
Sure. The company was known as RBL, Logistics and Trucking, and they were, again,
out of Broward County, Coral Springs.
Broward County, Coral Springs. And they had, again, almost 300 employees. They had 250 plus trucks on the road. And they had over 1,500 investors that got duped. And here's what was fascinating. The team that had been assembled at RBL imbued a certain level of credibility to the whole enterprise. They had former chiefs of police that were employees who were kind of pitching the veracity of the company, right?
Wow.
The safe harbor of the investment. So they had people that were former chiefs of police.
Who better to trust than your priest, rabbi, or a chief of police, right?
Exactly. You actually had some firefighters that were investors, and they spread the word amongst their firefighters. You had assistant sheriffs in the BSO, Broward Sheriff's Office, that were, and I'm not saying they were involved, by no means were they involved, but because they were investors, people looked at that and said, well, if you're investing, then it must be safe. It must be legitimate. And that's unfortunately what happens with these Ponzi schemes. You have a level of credibility, a level of, veracity to the whole enterprise. And people say, well, if my friend's doing it or my cousin's doing it, and if my fellow churchgoer is doing it, why shouldn't I do it? Because it looks like a safe investment. And the paperwork all looks pretty good. But remember, Braulio, whether people are educated or not educated, a lot of people get duped by these things in South Florida.
So even if you're smart, don't think you're so smart that you won't get duped by these kind of
That's
deals.
exactly right. And, look, we've seen it, unfortunately, in our community a few too many times. We had the Rothstein Ponzi scheme. We were involved in that for one of the largest creditors of that Ponzi. And we saw how some very successful people, very wealthy people got duped in that one. Sure. And in this case, we have 1,500, innocent investors who, again, got duped. And our job now is to try to do everything we can within our resources to recoup as much as we can for them. And look, it's one of those things, you lose a lot of sleep over this stuff. As I said, we're kind of in the people business. These are human beings. I mean, these are their lives. This is their livelihood. In many instances, these are retirement funds.
That's so sad.
And we take it seriously. I mean, me and my team, we meet almost every day to discuss where we're at. We have our strategy sessions. We talk with our experts. And it's really a privilege to be able to serve in this capacity, because it is a little bit of public service, working with the SEC on these types of things. But it's great. We have a great group of lawyers we're working with at the SEC. We work with the AUSAs that are prosecuting the criminal side of it, and we all kind of work in tandem together. So it's just really been a tremendous experience. And again, I can't do it without a wonderful group of lawyers and just experts around me to help us do what we need to do. And serve the court, frankly, because we're a fiduciary of the court.
Paul, any final thoughts on your firm or how someone can get a hold of you? Tell us how someone wants to get a hold of you.
Sure. Look, my firm is Tripp Scott. My email is pol@trippscott.com. And look, the truth is, it's been just a sincere pleasure of mine. I've been at my firm now for over 30 years. The managing partner of my law firm. I have a great group of people that I work with every day, and we just like to be outside counsel, general counsel to all of our companies and all of the clients that we service. And like most law firms that have been around a long time, our best referral sources, frankly, are our own clients. And by the same token, the smaller boutique firms that may not have some of the resources we have that we work with a lot in the community. And on the flip side of that, some of the larger law firms in town that have, let's just say 2,000 lawyers or 3,000 lawyers, a lot of times those law firms have conflicts. So a lot of the times those law firms come to us because they know we have real experience, real trial experience, and real experience in other aspects of the practice. And they come to us because we can help them because they have conflicts or they just don't have the resources. So, I really just like going in the office every day, working with my team. I look forward to seeing my team every day, and I've been very blessed in that regard. 30 plus years.
Well, thank you for coming today. Educating me and our audience. Just amazing the complexity of some of these cases you've been dealing with, and the human element, and how you really put your heart into it. And I could see how it tears at you a little bit when you look at the human element. So
it does, Braulio. But as lawyers, right? Not to be on a soapbox, but we're providing services. We're providing services, and sometimes obviously for fees, but sometimes you just got to focus on the service side of it, and you're trying to get results. And at the end of the day, we're trying to get a good result for our clients at every level. So whether it's a Ponzi, whether it's a Rico action, or whether it's just a dispute that we're trying to resolve a problem for a client. So when it comes to us, it's a problem, and we got to solve the problem, and that's our job.
Paul Lopez, problem solver.
Something like that. I like that better than CEO of a trucking company.
Thanks for coming by today, buddy.
Thanks, Braulio. Appreciate it.